Alright guys, it has finally happened. I just bought a Chevy Trailblazer that I don't intend to immediately yank the engine out and throw the thing into the scrap bin. We have been looking for a project like this for quite a while, and frankly, being in the Northeast, it is kind of challenging to find one of these cars that isn't absolutely rotted out. And we have finally found a good candidate that is in excellent condition, and the rust is almost non-existent. There are a lot of Trailblazer haters out there, and most of the hate comes from right here. No, not the engine, but where it is situated. There is just no room to work on anything in this engine bay. Just doing simple stuff like a starter or an alternator is an absolute pain in the butt. To get the valve cover off of the engine, you gotta take the intake off. To get the intake off, you gotta take the ECU off of the side of it. But there's this really dumb bracket that also bolts on there that makes it hard to get to the intake bolts. Oh, but also the rear intake bolt is all the way up against the firewall and it's super hard to get to. And the front intake bolt is behind the alternator, so you gotta take that off too. So doing any kind of work to this engine in this particular chassis is an absolute nightmare. And frankly, that is one of the reasons that we have sort of shied away from this whole chassis in general. GM did not make this thing easy to work on, but we can make a bunch of improvements to it by simplifying a lot of the functions of the vehicle that will make this thing a lot more pleasant to be around. So it's going to take a lot of work, but I think it will be worth it in the end because this is going to be one of the coolest street cruisers on the road. Now, if you guys are totally new to the channel, this is the Vortec 4200, and this is definitely one of the mainstays for this particular YouTube channel because this engine right here we have found to be extremely capable. Now, I am a inline six guy. I love the way that they sound. I could not afford a 2JZ, an RB26, a Barra, or any of the other options at the time that I got into these engines. But I wanted that sound. I wanted that high revving inline six sound. Also, I was raised in a GM family, so I definitely have a bias towards a Chevrolet engine. And therefore, this is pretty much the best thing going for an inline six that is made by General Motors in the US. And what we found with this engines over 5 years of development is that they are very stout and they love boost. We developed a turbo manifold with some folks in Australia, the guys at Vortec Performance, and we specifically designed that turbo manifold to fit the Trailblazer chassis. That should give you an awful big hint of where this thing is going, and I am super excited to get this one started. There is one problem though with this particular example of the Vortec 4200, and I'll show you that now. Still has oil pressure, but that is not good. To continue this video, I want to play a game with you guys, and that game is called What's That Noise? As you heard earlier, there are some very bad noises coming from under the hood. And what I want you guys to do is take your best guess as to what is causing that noise. Is it as benign as an exhaust manifold crack, which is very common on these 2008 and later engines? Or is it more serious internal damage, like a spun rod bearing, maybe a wrist pin? Maybe the skirts of a piston have collapsed and it's starting to rock back and forth in the cylinder. Or is it a flex plate bolt that came loose? There are lots of possibilities, and I want you guys to leave a comment down below with your best guess as to exactly what the cause is. And in the next video, we will go through all of them and find out exactly what the problem is. Alright, so let's check out the interior on this thing. This is probably one of the nicest cars I've ever really had as far as like features go. So it's got dual climate control, so that you can set, you know, different zones. Leather interior. I've never had anything that fancy. Everything looks to be in pretty fantastic shape. Dash isn't cracked. It has a sunroof, which, depending on how you view things, could be a good thing or a bad thing, because they tend to leak. Oh look, it has OnStar. I'll probably never be using that. It even has heated seats. That's crazy. It's even got the appropriate stickering on the side view mirror. Oh boy. I'm sitting in the rear seat and I just looked up and I noticed this little thing. Are you serious? I feel like I'm on Pimp My Ride.
And Josh, check this out. We customized your mud flaps with 7-inch monitors, dog.
That's useless.
Look at this. This is ridiculous. It even has climate control for the rear passengers so that you can set the temperature for if you're sitting in the back seat. This is insane. And look, it even has little auxiliary inputs. I could hook my GameCube up to this thing. All right, we're going back to the early 2000s. We're gonna play Smash Brothers in this thing. For the longest time, we've shied away from the Trailblazer platform, and I'm about to show you why. Holy crap, that thing is heavy. Now, you may be thinking, 3450? That's actually lighter than I was expecting. Well, one of the wires for our scale decided to take a crap on me, so I have to move a cable from scale to get the true weight. But when you do that, the car comes out to 4,702 pounds. And that's without even a driver in the car. To put this into perspective, my Studebaker, which weighed 3,000 pounds with me in it, took 581 horsepower to go a 999. And in order to get this beast at its current weight to go a 999, it's gonna take 923. That's 342 horsepower more that you have to make just because of the weight of the vehicle. And frankly, that's the entire reason we haven't messed with one of these platforms. They're just so dang heavy. Now, the reason that weight is such a pain with this particular platform is we're really getting into the built bottom end territory with the build. I really don't feel comfortable making that much horsepower on stock rods, especially since what happened right there. And so we're probably gonna have to lighten this thing up significantly and also put some forged rods into it. Now, the Trailblazer already comes equipped with a solid axle parallel 4-link rear suspension setup. And you may think, this thing's already set up for drag racing. This is awesome. Hold your horses. This thing could probably use a little bit of tweaking. I don't really think that the bar angles and that kind of thing are really in the right spot for what we're going to be doing. And it's certainly not as adjustable as what you see on a lot of the high-end race cars. The rear end is sort of a unique thing to itself. It is a Chevy 10-bolt, but it's only an 8-inch ring gear. Apparently these things are pretty tough. Gear ratio is actually pretty close to what I would want in the final build, and it's a 373, and it already has a limited slip differential. So unfortunately, I don't know if this thing is strong enough for what we're going to be doing with it, but we may be able to use parts of it in order to do what we want to do. Now, this is a 2008 Chevy Trailblazer. And if you don't have access to the VIN tag and you want to quickly identify a 2008 or 2009, you can simply look at this right here. This is your ECM for the car. And if you look right here, it has 3 plugs. Now, all Vortec 4200s had an ECU with 3 plugs, but they came with 3 different versions over the years. Now, the first version was the P10, It was sort of a different shape than this, and it had 3 plugs that were evenly sized. Definitely not this one. The next version was the P12, and it had 3 plugs as well. But the one plug, I believe it's this one here, was also the same size as the first plug here. This one right here is the E67. Now this has 3 plugs as well, but there is 1 small one and 2 larger ones. This is the one that is considered most tunable by most tuners out there. It is the same ECU as they would put on a LS. And that means that HP Tuners has put a lot of time into this ECU, exposing all of the tables that we need to make this thing make big horsepower. Now, that being said, we probably aren't going to be using that ECU to be running this car. Alright guys, I hope that you are as excited about this car as I am. I am super thrilled that we finally found a good example of these cars. Most of the time, they're pretty rough. So I am definitely excited to get this build started, and leave a comment down below of what you would do with this thing. So with that, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Literally, if I open the screen more than this, the screen shuts off. Oh well, we'll make do. Heck yeah! Heck yeah!